Hey, good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's kind of early. It's about 5:09, about 5:10 on the Saturday morning. Thankfully, I don't have to work today, nor next Saturday, or the Saturday after. Apparently, I have my Saturdays. But you can see down there, I want to talk about, from my personal opinion as a fan, because yes, I am still a fan, of the evolution of NXT. You know, we all remember when NXT originally first started. Basically, it was, and I can't believe I'm saying this. 2010 was the start of NXT, but not the NXT we now know. 2010, Vince McMahon decided to come up with a sort of a blending of wrestling and reality television. And what that means is he decided to take some of his top developmental prospects out of what was then FCW, bring them to the main stage of WWE, put them on NXT, put them through these different mini games and obstacles, and then have them have maybe one, and then allow them to have some matches on the show. And sometimes the matches would consist of maybe just 2 or 3. Now, I'm not saying that NXT didn't do a decent job. There are some from the original NXT that are still on the roster today. You know, you have Wade Barrett, you have Daniel Bryan, you have Heath Slater, you have Darren Young, you have Ryback, Skip Sheffield. So a lot of people from the original NXT are still around. Some have moved on, some have gone to other promotions and gone to other endeavors, but still, they're still there. So that kind of shows you a bit of the impact that the original concept of NXT had. The fact that they still brought in and kept some of these people. Now, the following year, they tried to switch it up a little bit by, I think, focusing on the Divas, I believe, that year. I'm not really sure if it was the Divas last year or the Divas the year after or what. Actually, they focused on the Divas in the 3rd season. The 2nd season was kind of, the second run basically for NXT was kind of similar. Now, did it produce as many stars as the first one did? Not particularly. There were some. Titus O'Neil was one of them. Fandango, wherever he is another. So there was some, but not as many. Then the 3rd season of NXT came around, and basically you ended up being focused more on the Divas. And did they bring out some stars out of that? Yes. Some maybe not, but not as much. And then of course, they decided to come up with an idea to do a redemption run, as we all know, where basically you were bringing back people that probably were on the main roster or back in FCW, bring them back, give them one more shot. And that just turned into basically another glorified version of WWE Superstars or WWE Main Event or whatever you want to call it. Basically it became the Velocity, the WWE Velocity of that time. So it's no surprise that Triple H, obviously he saw the potential of NXT. He saw the potential, the original concept of it was to create new stars, and give them the opportunity that they wouldn't get if they went straight to the main roster. So looking back on it, in just 5 years, it's kind of surprising that in 5 years how much it's changed. 5 years. I mean, when Triple H started this whole this rebirth of NXT, this rebooted NXT, taking FCW and evolving it into what it is now, NXT, was surprising. I mean, you look back on it, I know it's been 5 years, but it's like, it doesn't even feel like that. And you look at where NXT is now. No one would have ever told you that I mean, if someone would have told you back then, when the original concept was created, that NXT would be where it's at now, no one would have believed you. A lot of people would have said that NXT wouldn't even last any longer. As a matter of fact, I'm sure some people would tell you that when NXT, before Triple H got his hands on it, started to become more of that glorified Velocity, second-rate show that, Velocity was and somewhat ECW was in a sense, a lot of people, again, like I said, would have told you it wasn't going to last any longer and they were going to trash it. So what's Triple H do? Triple H decides within a few years, you know what? I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to do something about it. And what does he do? What does Triple H do? He decides to basically, in 2011, 2012 I should say, 2012, 2013. That's how far this goes. Yeah. 2012, in just 3 years, he decides to take something that went through several seasons, many seasons as I look at it, and turn it around into something that is just unbelievable. I mean, you take a look at the names of the men and women that are coming into NXT, that are coming to WWE specifically to be part of NXT. I mean, recently, just James Storm of all people. James Storm. I mean, here's a guy that if you don't read spoilers and you're more about the I want to live in the moment kind of deal, I want to see, if you're basically more of an old school kind of person and you don't, like I say, you don't read the spoilers and everything and you want to be surprised about what you see instead of reading about it, taking place before you see it. Basically, if you want to, like I say, have that old school feel of the unpredictable, of the unexpected, here's a guy that if you look at it from that view of being old school and still want to be surprised with the unexpected, the unexplainable and all that, here's a guy that a week before, or several weeks before, was competing in a 6-sided ring for TNA. And now all of a sudden, a few weeks later, he's in NXT. Now again, I'm sure if you're an old school kind of person that doesn't like to read spoilers and anything, that came as a huge surprise to you. I mean, think about it. Before spoilers in wrestling started to really come to the forefront because of the social media and the internet, anytime somebody would jump ship, you'd be surprised. I mean, if you heard their name being mentioned on TV as a upcoming debut, you'd be like, well, wait a minute. I just saw them compete for that other promotion just last night or just last week on television. Now all of a sudden they're going here? I'll give you an example. I remember when the Steiner brothers went to WWE. Every Saturday morning, I would watch WWE or WWF at the time. I would watch Superstars every Saturday morning on KTVU. And all of a sudden, I hear because at the end of the show, they would always talk about what's upcoming next week or the following week. So I remember them talking about the debut of the Steiners. And I just sat there and I was like, the Steiners? No way. And this was at a time when I was just getting into not just, I was already into WWE thanks to my sister, more so than I used to be. But this was at a time where I would be flipping through the channels and I would see WCW when it was still part of the NWA, and I would be watching AWA on ESPN. So I remember watching the Steiners or hearing about the Steiners in WCW. And then all of a sudden, here I'm hearing their names being mentioned on WWE as debuting the next week on Superstars. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. But they weren't. And That's what really, and to me that was a huge surprise because I didn't know they were going to WWE. I didn't know they were going there. I didn't even know Ric Flair was going there until Bobby Heenan mentioned his name. Name on Wrestling Challenge. I didn't know. Nobody did. It'd be kind of like if Sting, if he had taken the opportunity, it'd be kind of like Sting jumping ship to WWE and making his debut at the Royal Rumble as a surprise entrant. Suddenly you'd hear this strange kind of surfer music or whatever, kind of like music maybe similar to what he had in WCW, and all of a sudden here comes Sting, and it's like what the heck, you know? Nobody saw that coming. Nobody would have seen that coming if Sting would have jumped ship around the same time Flair and the Steiners did. Nobody. Even when Lex Luger made his appearance at WrestleMania via satellite, I was like, what the heck? Because I didn't know. Nobody did. And the point is, you know, if you're an old school kind of person and you still want to live vicariously like that, where you want to see it for yourself, you don't want people to spoil it, you basically are a non-spoiler kind of person, then to see someone like James Storm, who, to you, as a non-spoiling person, or individual, or fan, to you had just seen this guy on TNA, and all of a sudden here he is on NXT. It's the same with Tommaso Ciampa. Here's a guy that, and if you're a non-spoiler kind of person, you know, if you're a non-spoiler kind of person, here's a guy that was just competing in the six-sided ring on an episode of Evloution, and all of a sudden here he is a few days later, he's in NXT with Johnny Gargano, I think, from Evolve. And if that's not all, in one night he pulls basically what many people consider a Rick Rude. He appears both on Impact and NXT. And you wonder, as a non-spoiling fan, how is that possible? Even though you might say, well, they're both taped in advance, but still I want to be surprised. It shocks you. It shocks you. It's like, he's in one, it's like, what's going on? But now more so you see him with NXT and Evolve and all that because of what NXT has become. You see him choosing NXT more so over TNA. And then, like I say, with James Storm arriving, and then earlier this year, Samoa Joe, it's like, here are individuals that you were always hoping would come to WWE, but you were always afraid that if they came to WWE and got skyrocketed to the main roster just because of name value alone, they'd either have a name change or they wouldn't be utilized correctly. But now here you have this here you have this platform for them that's taking off like nobody else's business, and suddenly they have a place where they can establish themselves. Now true, some people that have come into the WWE, like Prince Devitt, Kana, and a few others, have had to change their names. No doubt about it. And why would they change their names? Because WWE wants to own that name. You know, Finn Balor, Prince Devitt, now Finn Balor. You know, WWE wants to own that. You know, Kana now being Asuka, or Asuka. You know, WWE wants to own that name, that trademark. You know, the same, you know, the names, the list just goes on. You know, Yuha Nation. You know, Yuha Nation, now Apollo Crews. They want to own the Apollo Crews name. Hideo Itami, even though he chose, I mean, and this is one thing I will give him credit, at least they're letting the people they sign choose what names they would go by, even if, let's say, WWE is going to own that right to it. You have Kenta coming in as Hideo Itami. Why? Because even though they let him choose it, they want to own the rights to it. You see, some people might say that's the only downfall of NXT is the fact that you're not letting them just be who they are. You know, like you've let Joe be, like you've let Samoa Joe be, or you let James Storm be. Well, here's why I think that's the reason. Because to WWE, not many people have seen Finn Balor's work except through the internet, through videos on YouTube, Daily Motion, whatever. That's the only way they know about the guy. But they don't know that much about him. You know, to WWE, there are still people that, okay, they heard of Prince Devitt, but they don't know much about Prince Devitt. They don't know what he's capable of in that ring. So to them, he's a new creation. By becoming Finn Balor, he's a new creation. Same with Yuhan Nation. Everybody who's heard about him knows that he's done in Dragon Gate USA, Evolve, Chikara, and a few other indie promotions. But yet not many people do know of him or have seen what he's capable of. So being Apollo Crews, he becomes a new creation, and he's still able to kind of be himself in a sense. Same with Kana. Not many people knew who Kana was for the past decade or so. Unless, like I said, you watched it on the internet, YouTube, and all that. So being Asuka, or Asuka, you know, she's this new person. She becomes this new person. And she becomes a new creation, so she's reborn. Same with Kenta. I mean, everybody knew who Kenta was, especially if you've seen him compete in Ring of Honor. But nobody really knew who he was, except for that exposure. So by becoming Hideo Itami, he becomes a new creation. He becomes reborn, so that this way, you know, even if someday he decides to leave the WWE, which I don't think he will, but you never know, he can go back to being Kenta, but because of that worldwide exposure he has, he'll be known as Hideo Itami all the time. You see, that again, these may be the faults that some people don't like about NXT, but at least they're probably the smallest faults you can find. They are. They really are. But getting back to NXT and the evolution, I mean, when NXT started, it's like nobody really knew much about NXT. I mean, 2011, 2012 comes around, NXT gets rebranded, it gets reborn, it's given new lease on life. Okay? It's given a new lease on life in 2012. And every man and woman that has come through there is given a new lease on life. They are. They're given that new lease. They're able to, you know, finally have more exposure than they've ever had. They had this new lease on life. And it shows you how far this company has flourished, has changed. I mean, heck, when you think about it, you look at EC3 and TNA, and EC3, in a sense, started developing that character of his towards the end of his WWE NXT run. And that was at a time that WWE NXT was just starting to grow into what it is now. And that's when he started to build his character. He had the haircut and everything. So Derek Bateman was slowly becoming EC3 there. And again, that's just... It just shows you that even outside of it, how much of an impact NXT has, because they were allowing a guy like Derek to develop into what he is now in TNA. Now, is it a regret of letting him go? Absolutely. Do you think they'll snag him back up? Does anybody think they're going to snag him back up once he's gone from TNA? Oh yeah, definitely. They'll bring him back to They'll bring him back to NXT. They'll bring him back. You know, they'll probably let him be Derek Bateman again, or they'll let him be EC3, because that's how he's being known now as. True, he's not going to be